enterprise. What is your business model in Africa? I'm Zaina Kanbai. I am the founder of South-South Women and also the director of South-South and Triangular Cooperation for South-South Women. We're going to start by giving you a bit of an idea of who we are, just so that you understand the space that you've come into. So South-South Women is an international network of conscientious women and men from across the Global South. The Global South are countries that we collectively refer to as emerging economies or developing countries. And each of us are engaged in wisdom sharing and impact work throughout the world. The Wisdom Conversations, launched in April this year, are about creating connections across cultures through authentic sharing of personal and professional life experiences. But key to this is that we have an agenda to provide solutions to current challenges. So we'll always come out of here with an idea of how to move ahead on somewhere or on an agenda that we had previously been considering or perhaps even stuck on. We have very clearly defined values as South-South Women. Inclusion, because we engage people across a broad spectrum. Acceptance, because we truly believe in cultivating a safe and secure atmosphere for people of every culture to be embraced. And honor, because we do what is consciously right. We also operate along a defined code of honor, which was developed by the pioneer influencers of South-South Women, of which Dr. Immaculate Maina, who's here, is one, and Ibiene Ogolo, the other. We stand for and never deride one another. We respect and consider the other's industries and networks, expertise, businesses and enterprises. By that we mean we will always come back to the source. We honor the source of where our information is coming from. We respect the integrity of the creation of the network. We speak truth and we seek to understand. And all of that allows for us to lead in what we consider positions women as the visionaries, strategists, and implementers for new opportunities and possibilities for impact in business and otherwise across the Global South. So today we decided to put a conversation on the table because while economies globally are repositioning themselves, many are looking to Africa as a new opportunity or a new prospect, or perhaps reconsidering Africa as a prospect. And we thought that we would like to put on the table the conversation of what is your business model in Africa? And to do that with respect to our value for cultural diversity, we have three incredible I would say, well, entrepreneurs, business people, people aligned with a way of thinking, of doing business in Africa that is about problem solving and innovation. And we will now go into their introductions before we move into the actual content for today's session. So once again, a very, very warm extended welcome to each of you from every part of the world from where you are joining us, whether that be Ireland or Kenya or the UK or Argentina or the US. Bulgaria, I'm sure we have some people from Bulgaria. Welcome and thank you for being here today. And I'll hand the floor to Dr. Ibiene Ogolo to introduce herself first.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Wisdom Conversation of today. I'm excited to be here. My name is Dr. Ibiene Ogolo. I am the Director for Public Relations, Communication and Media for South-South Women. Beyond that, I currently run 8 different companies that cut across different sectors, which include real estate, an online magazine, mining, oil and gas, advocacy, beauty and health. So it's going to be a very interesting conversation wherein I bring in personal experiences and discuss with the other participants here. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Ibiene, and I'll now hand over with, in terms of our respect for gender balance and diversity and expertise, to Justo Casal.
Yeah, thank you, Zaina. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, South Women, for the invitation. We'll, as Ibiene said, it's going to be an interesting conversation, different perspectives. My name is Justo Casal. I'm from Argentina, according to my passport. I'm the president of Merging Mundos. That's the end of the story of more than 20 years of living in and out of Africa. I came here in the 1999-2000 when my father was appointed as the Argentine ambassador to Kenya. And I was in the US playing golf, living my dream, trying to be the Tiger Woods of Latin America. But then my dream changed. I came to Africa, and as many people, feel the positive malaria is in my life. Every day, I think what we can do to have a better world, starting from the human cradle, which is Africa. I've been able to work in refugee camps with the UN, working for the Standard newspaper here in Kenya as the first paparazzi, going to slums to see how different, media personalities came along, like Kalamashaka, those ones, who are in this Kenyan scene, going to Dandora or Caliph Records. And then I believe that, there was more to learn, there was more to see. And I undertook my human rights law. I did a master's in the UK, and then I went for my thesis to Liberia and Guinea. And I've always been at the grassroots level, understanding the needs, understanding the differences, and understanding the similarities between these continents, and between Latin America and Africa. And it's with that experience that we're here today, that I'm here today, just sharing with experience of going around Africa, understanding its people, and that understanding put it in a Merging Mundos context, which you will know a little bit more along the presentation. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Justo. And for those of you who don't know, Justo is not only my business partner, but also my husband. And we had the great fortune of meeting in Buenos Aires in Argentina through the introduction of the Kenyan embassy. And we still joke that we owe dowry to the government of Kenya for introducing us. So 6 years later, together, and Justo has been an avid supporter and investor in South Women. So thank you. And I will now like to hand over to Veselina Kracheva.
Thank you very much, Zaina. And I would like to, first of all, thank everybody who made it today. I know it can be a very busy time, and with a lot of the shocks that we're seeing all over the world, it's not easy to prioritize, but I'm very grateful for everyone who made it today. Now, some of you know me, many of you won't know me, which is why I'll just give you a quick indication as to why I'm able to speak to you on this topic today. So my name is Veselina, and basically most of what I'm going to discuss today is going to come from my experience with working in emerging economies. As you can see on the right of that slide, you have several pins which indicate the places where I have lived in. Of course, I haven't indicated the places I've traveled to. Before Corona, we had access to airplanes, so we actually were doing a lot of that. But these are places where I've spent at least 6 months, so I have had the chance to get to know the culture, get to know the way of doing business in them, and I'm therefore able to speak from that perspective. Now, something you should notice about this map is that there's no Latin America on it, so I do not have any substantive experience there, and I'm pointing out this lag because I want you to also understand my limitations and I'll talk to you why it's important to understand those also later on. But my current work is as the country director for Oxford Business Group. This is an organization which does international research in developing markets, so it's very pertinent to today's topic. And with Oxford Business Group, I have, and I noticed I've forgotten a pin on the map, I've actually lived in Mongolia as well. But with them, I have done a few different markets, mostly the ones you see on the south. They work in emerging markets in 35 different countries across the globe. And this is basically the type of experience I'm able to use to talk to you today. Something that is important from that perspective is that the work we do, the investment reports we write, cater to investors. So this is the perspective I'll also be covering when I start talking to you in a few minutes. The perspective of the African startup or the person trying to do business within Africa, and being African, of course, cannot be covered by a white person. So that's why we have more representative and more interesting experience from that point of view. That's basically what I wanted to share about myself.
Thank you so much, Veselina. Thank you, Justo, and thank you, Ibiene. And Veselina, I will now hand over to you to share your screen on where we will begin today's conversation, doing business in frontier markets.
Thank you, Zaina, and I'm happy that this actually went very smoothly this time. So here we go. Now, I hope I didn't speak too soon. Yes, the topic that I'll be covering today is doing business in frontier markets. And again, it is to serve as basically more or less establishing common grounds so that we all speak on the same level of knowledge, which means that many of you are going to be familiar with the concepts I'm speaking to. Some of you are going to be nodding, others will be like surprised. So feel free to comment as I discuss those topics, so I'll be able to answer also some of your concerns when I discuss those. Some of those will hopefully be a little bit controversial, so we have a good reason to have a chat on them. Now, I'm starting with, basically I try to summarize the essence of what I want to talk to you today. So there's three lines on the bottom that you're going to see, which also I used as the quote, which is knowledge and understanding are the cornerstone of investment, yet they are most lacking where investment is most needed. The key to resolving this discrepancy includes creative approaches and flexibility. So this is going to shape what I want to discuss with you today. Now, in terms of the various topics I want to cover, very quickly, we're going to speak about what are developing markets, how they are different from developed markets, why investors are interested in them, as well as some of the challenges and tips to resolving those challenges. I also see that the poll popped up. I think it's a good moment to mention this. We want to evaluate how familiar everyone is with the topic, so that we're also able to cater it. And Zaina will definitely help me at some point to mention the results, so we can make sure that we tailor what we discuss to where everybody stands on understanding investment. All right, perfect. Now let's launch into the topic. First of all, what are developing markets? There are many definitions of that, and I'm not going to go into much detail. Something I'm going to mention is that according to most definitions, whether coincidentally or because of historical context, etc., most of the developing markets tend to fall in the southern hemisphere, which is very much in line with what Zaina and the organization have discovered, and why we call it South-South Women, is because a lot of the developing and emerging countries come up within that hemisphere. Now, I'm going to use emerging, developing markets and frontier markets interchangeably. There are slight differences, which I'm not going to go into right now, but I just wanted to let you know. So now we're looking at that, and we already recognize that the developing markets cover several different continents. So there is a diversity that you're able to establish from there. If we decide to focus on Africa, then we're going to notice that now we're talking about many different countries that are covered under that terminology. It's important for us to understand that, because there's a type of diversity that is really crucial to investment. But very often when we talk about developing markets, we tend to lump them into a single term and try to generalize about them. So that's what I'll try to do today. So don't be annoyed with me, but you have to always take this with a pinch of salt, with understanding that there are a lot of differences which would be crucial. And some of the points I make might be invalid in certain countries, while other of the points I make might be very valid in others. So that's something that we need to have in mind. Finally, if we zoom in on a certain country, let's say Kenya, then we notice that you have a lot of different zonality there. You have a lot of different counties, as we call them here, which means that you have another layer of complexity and of diversity which has to be considered. If you come from Europe, or if you come from, let's say, France or Germany, you'll be like, but you know, we also have like different regional splits. Doesn't mean anything. You can still make decisions on investment based on what the country is like. Well, this is not really the case in most of the developing world, and I'll just use Kenya as an example. So if you look at Kenya, we have 47 counties, yes, which again, administrative districts, so not too relevant. But then within that, we have that many cultures, and you also have 68 regional languages. Religion speaking, the country is not homogeneous, so it's not like in Nairobi you have 85% Christian and 11% Muslim. No, you have a lot of big Muslim population on the coast, then you have Christian populations in other locales. So basically you have a lot of heterogeneity within the counties. In terms of GDP contribution, you can also see Nairobi is a big contributor with 21% of GDP, while Isiolo, another county, just has 0.2. Of course, there are different sizes, etc. But I'm just trying to demonstrate that there's a lot of diversity. And when you look at growth as well, 2.5% for some of them, 10% for some others for 2017 numbers, which is there to demonstrate that each county can almost be seen as a separate economy, which has separate rules and has separate characteristics which are important to investment. So this is the pinch of salt we're starting with. Now, how are developing markets, if we kind of get into the generalization stage, how are developing markets and frontier markets different from what we call developed markets? So I will list a few things here, and I would like each of you to think through my list very critically, because this is not an exhaustive list, I'm very clear on that. And think of other factors which make frontier markets different to development, which are kind of close to your heart, so we can discuss those as we continue with the presentation. So by most definitions, developing or frontier markets are defined based on some value of the gross national income. Basically, this means that we define developed and developing mostly on the wealth of the country, on the earning of its people, yeah? Now, some of the defining characteristics of developing markets, because even if that is the definition, that actually there are a lot of similarities that can be outlined up. So some of the defining characteristics is that we're talking about the rapid growth. So very often the economies are much smaller, which means that when you're, the real value is going to be smaller of growth, but the percentage value is very big. So this is important in terms of where the country finds itself as a stage and what kind of rapid changes you can expect. We have lower per capita GDP and earnings, again, comes from the definition directly. And also this means low average consumer purchasing power, which is important for anybody who wants to launch a product or wants to kind of invest in something that caters to the end consumer, basically everybody, because in the end, this is going to, what is going to define how feasible your product is, how you have to do your pricing. We also look at small middle class and significant extremes. Just to give you an example from my personal experience, on a trip to India, I was staying in a very fancy hotel somewhere in Mumbai, enjoying, perfect service, everything inside is amazing. And then, typical European, I want to go outside and do a walk in the city. The first thing I do, basically, not even walking 10 meters, is almost a slum where people are lying on the ground, the smell is untenable, and just you see dire poverty. And this is something that is not atypical for markets in the developing world, where you have ultra rich, but you also have ultra poor living in a very close proximity. While in other, in the more developed world, you might see much less of a difference between the income levels. So that's kind of what I'm describing here. We have younger populations. This is something that's been spoken to a lot, so I'm not going to go in detail. We have larger informal sector. This is due to many factors. Sometimes in the developing countries, you simply don't have that many systems for creating enterprises, or it's too complicated, there's no supervision, etc., etc. In the end, that leads to a lot of people who want to make a living and don't have so much access to a formal sector because it is small, having to create their own companies. That's why we talk about entrepreneurship in Africa so much, and other such phenomena. It also leads to large problems in information, which is one of the key issues that we're trying to resolve also within my organization. We also have infrastructural differences between the developed and the developing markets. So basically what you have is super modern infrastructure in some places due to leapfrogging. So they didn't have historic infrastructure. So now they were able to it would be cheaper for them to build the more modern version. And then you have non-existent infrastructure in other places. And another example I wanted to give you, so for example, it's very possible in a developing world setting that you have a super ultra modern airport with a lot of amazing facilities within it, and then you go outside and the road that leads to it is absolutely incapable of carrying the traffic that it's generating. So whether it's a dirt road or it's foothold, etc., this is not an atypical scenario, also because of how investment is done in developing markets. Then we have the fact that information is not as readily available within developing rather than developed markets, which can be a huge problem because investment, again, as I mentioned earlier, the cornerstone is information and understanding. This is due to a lot of reasons I already explained. We have immature bureaucracies, which means that processes are not as set up, which again leads to very different ways of doing business within those markets rather than what you would have as standards in other markets. You have low international connectivity, and you can just look at Africa, for example. It is much more difficult to fly from Kenya to Ghana than it is to Kenya to London, even though the first two are on the same continent, yeah, from Nairobi to London. We also have aid in developing countries, which significantly can significantly distort certain markets. So this is something as an investor you have to be careful of, that you know, an aid company might come in and completely distort your market. And we have high impact and return on investment potential. In economics, we always speak of high risk, high return. So this kind of is very in line with what you're seeing here. So this is in terms of how frontier markets are different. Zaina, is there any interesting comment you want to share at this point from the comments?
We haven't received anything in the chat, and just to emphasize that the question Veselina is asking, aside from what she has shared on the screen, do you have any suggestions from your various countries or continents on what other factors make a frontier market different? Please share them on the chat, and we'd be happy to read them out to the audience.
Yeah, and do feel free to criticize anything I've said as well. Constructive criticism is how progress is made, so I'm always happy to listen to other perspectives. Good, so that's in terms of my view of how frontier markets are different from the lens of an investment perspective. Yeah? Now, another view is, okay, I spoke about a lot of challenges here. I spoke about a lot of differences. So why would investors even be interested in looking in frontier markets if some of the things are so different and so complicated from the perspective of somebody who comes from more of the northern hemisphere? Yeah, so that's kind of it. And again, same applies. If you see on my list that something is missing, you're not agreeing with something, please comment so we can then address it and talk to it. So what I would want to talk about is basically the way we look at frontier markets in organizations like mine is we see them as the lands of opportunity. So basically you have a lot of unfulfilled needs. So I spoke to the fact that you don't have as much industrialization, you don't have as many systems, etc. This also means that people have a lot of needs which can be addressed with creative solutions. So this is basically, for an entrepreneur, a need is equal to opportunity to create a venture. So from that perspective, you have a lot of opportunities just from the fact that you have so many unfulfilled needs. Also, you have the fact that very often in developing markets, investors will face way less competition than they would face in their native markets. So for example, if you're coming up with a solution to a problem, considering that all the basic needs are taken care of in a developed market, if you're coming up with a solution to a problem, the size of your market might be tiny, because again, it's very difficult to have a problem that affects that many people. Either that or your innovation has to have huge investment, because again, most of the rest is already dealt with. Or you have many people thinking of the same thing in the same time, because if you have a big problem, a lot of people are thinking about it at the same time. With developing markets, you don't have as much capital to start with, which means that even the competition for ventures that you might launch is also much lower in many sectors. I already spoke about high risk, high return, so that's another reason. A third reason is diversifying portfolios, and the fact that the developing markets very often, due to the lack of interconnectivity that I spoke to earlier, are not as dependent on each other as developed markets would be. So if you're talking about, let's say, France and Germany, two markets I'm very familiar with, they're very interconnected, they trade with each other a lot. So if you're a French investor and want to diversify your portfolio, going to Germany is not going to do much, because in the end, if something very bad happens to France, it's likely to happen to Germany as well. Now, if you want to go and invest in Kenya, let's say, then that's a very different story. The markets are not connected, so you don't have so many systemic risks from that perspective. I'll actually just take the opportunity to quickly show you some data based on that, so we can kind of understand to what extent that's true. So this is data from the UN on global foreign direct investment, and that speaks to the countries receiving the foreign direct investment, so where it's going. So as you can see in the past 10 years, if you look at that, the outline that comes with this kind of beige color, grayish-beige color, you can see that the investment for the emerging markets is actually quite stable in terms of real value. So it doesn't really change based on shocks in the economies. Well, if you look at the totality, which is basically the blue line that you're seeing here, the blue outline, then you can see that there are a lot of shocks that are happening. It's just that they're not affecting the developing market investment. They're mostly affecting the investment in the developed market. And you know, some of these shocks, I mean, here we don't see enough, but you can see the crisis of 2018, 2019, which had a dip. You can have some years here, and then, you know, some, etc. So it really follows the global economy, but not the case for developing economies, which is an interesting thing to see. And again, shows you to what extent the factors that affect the global north are not necessarily affecting the global south. Now, to continue on my little list here of the opportunities, you also see the idea that there is a high demand for investment in emerging markets. So people know the needs and they're asking for them, which means that governments are competing to attract investors. So you can have attractive tax breaks, you can have attractive setups like the special economic zones. This is something that Kenya is really advanced in compared to the rest of the world. The most advanced company in terms of, country in terms of special economic zones is China. They have something like 10,000. But in Kenya, we also have a good number of special economic zones which offer different types of investors, different opportunities to get exclusive and more favorable conditions for their investment. Then we have the idea of making positive impact, and I'll be very clear, I'm not, I don't have any experience or much experience in the charity side of things, so we are really on the business side of investment in the country, so you might want to make impact just in general for humanity. But if you were there, the last talk I did talking about the future of the enterprise again, but this time from this perspective of where humanity is evolving. So there we spoke a little bit about this concept of the impact age and the idea that we're moving towards impact-based and result-based ventures rather than the technological base, etc., that we're currently in. So from that perspective, if you're a super investor like Melinda and Bill Gates, for example, what you care about is seeing the whole humanity uplifted. And if that's your objective, then it becomes a very serious business objective to go to places where you can do the most impact. And yeah, so that's basically why this is an important topic, even within that concept of entirely commercial-based and investment-based opportunities and not charity. Infrastructure, I've put it as a question mark. If the ventures that you're trying to build are around solving infrastructure issues, then this is a positive, the fact that you don't have as much basically infrastructure developed in those places. But if you are in a place where you want to use certain infrastructure, then it can be an impediment. So that's why I'm saying, like, it depends on the type of investment. So this is basically in terms of why investors are looking at frontier markets. So Zaina, I'll just quickly shoot at you again. Do you have any comments that are relevant that I can address here?
Yes, I'll read out some comments to you. So we have a question from Patricia, which I'll ask you to note, Veselina, and handle in the Q&A. She would like some more information on how aid distorts markets or frontier markets, which is a very good question. She's also contributed to other features for what makes frontier markets different. Powerful few control the economy, and there's heavy red tape, government bureaucracy and foreign exchange scarcity, and high rates. Exchange.
Exchange rates.
Yeah. Nancy from Kenya has said that there is a big opportunity in frontier markets for new products from developed countries, such as Pampers versus baby nappies. And Michael Likoya, from the marketing manager of Entech Device, has asked, which I'll also ask you to take in the Q&A, is as an entrepreneur, what benefit would a frontier market have for us as a technology company? And Tekena Koko from Nigeria says, I think frontier markets also have volatile markets, maybe due to government policies, political factors, and fluctuation in exchange rates.
Yeah.
So I think all of those are good comments.
I think all of those are very fair points. The powerful few points it will take me 30 seconds. Yeah? Okay. So the powerful few points is basically relates a lot to these dichotomies that I spoke about, where you have very rich and very poor. So this is really in line with that. High exchange rates, all these other things that you mentioned, I'm completely okay. Perfect. So let me then move on to the next topic, which is speaking to challenges. So they are basically, do you see my entire screen, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay, good. So when we're speaking about challenges, and this is more the very practical side of what I want to discuss, is now we discuss about all these differences. So how do they translate on the investor level as challenges that need to be handled? What does this mean? So I've put the little summary that I put in the beginning for your information, but then I just delve into the content right there. So I'll speak to a few challenges. Again, this list is definitely not exhaustive. You also have to have in mind we have a time limitation. Please make note of other challenges so that we can talk about them and address them in the Q&A. Now, the first challenge I'll speak to, and I'm very biased here, is the challenge of information. I'm very biased because that's the problem that we're trying to solve by creating those investment reports that we create with my company. Now, the information problem comes from one of the reasons why you have such a big information problem is that you have the formal information gathering in developing countries tends to be very different than what you get in developed countries, or even sometimes tends to be lacking. And I'll just give you an example here with weather data. Yeah. So, for example, if you're an insurance company which deals with agriculture insurance, which is something that is really, really needed within the mostly agrarian developing economies, it's crucial for them to have it, and they don't have it. And you're one of these companies that are like, okay, I want to go into these markets, I want to make some money, and I also will have the opportunity to change people's lives in a very transformative way and help them sometimes get out of poverty and stuff like that, which is, big deal. Now, the problem is you go to these places and you're like, okay, now I just need to get the historical weather data for this locale for the last, 10 years so that I'm able to price my product and, make sure that the risk that I'm taking is well understood. And now you find out that there's just no such thing. Nobody's collecting these data. So even if you set up today and you decide, okay, I'll solve this problem by putting, meteorological equipment, it's too late. I mean, you need 10 years of data to be able to, basically understand the underlying trends, be able to understand what your risk is. So yeah, so your entire model is based on something that requires information. That information is not available. So that's one challenge. I'll speak to some solutions at the end, so I'll just cover the challenges. Now, another thing that is very typical for when we talk about differences between developing and developed is very large cultural differences. And don't get me wrong, you have a lot of cultural differences within the developed world as well. So if you're following the same rules you're following within a developed market, and you're trying to understand the difference between, how China deals with communication versus how Germany or France deals with communication, then you would be okay on that point. But you just kind of highlight some of the big differences we see within that communication, cultural differences. And for example, when people say no in different markets, how do they do it? And why in some markets you actually never hear no as a business person? And I'll give you an example from two of the markets I know well. This is Indonesia and Kenya. The reason why I chose these two is because they both have situations in which they will not say no to you. And that's a big problem because then you don't know what you're doing. But they say that that's for very different reasons. That happens for very different reasons. So for example, in Indonesia, people are extremely polite. For them, it's very important to save face. For them, telling no to you as somebody who is a guest in their country, or somebody who's coming to help or whatever, to do business with them, is just for purpose of saving face. They're not going to say no to you. So even if you ask them, oh, did you understand what I said? And they have no clue what you said, they'll still say yes, just to please you and not make you feel bad. Yeah. So this is a typical thing in Indonesia. So you have to be able to take much more subtle clues. You have to understand the culture. You have to understand that if somebody tells you maybe, then actually that's a very strong no. So you have to kind of be able to kind of, get a grasp of these things before you start trying to do business with Indonesians, for example. In Kenya, the situation is very different. Kenyans are very open-minded in general. They are very happy to speak their mind. But if they know that whether they say yes or no is going to influence the fact whether they're going to get business with you or no, then they're very likely in their head to have a following conversation, which is like, I don't know what this is, but I'll figure it out. I'll figure it out. So I'll say yes to it today, and then I'll go back and try to figure it out. The way they figure it out might not work for you. That's why it's important to understand, to get that no. But in the end, because of the way that you structured your communication, you're not going to get the right information to be able to properly do business. So just an example of how cultural differences can work in those cultures. The next one I wanted to cover is formal education. This is a huge problem when we're talking about entrepreneurship, because in many places, if somebody is looking to invest in an entity, they'll be very interested in the founder. And they will have checkpoints like, checklists like, did you go to an Ivy League school? Did you finish your master? Do you have a doctorate, etc., etc.? And these things are going to influence the investment decision. Now, if you were born in a country where, first of all, you don't have Ivy League schools, then only a very rich personality will be able to even get to that checklist, to be able to correspond to those, or apply to those functions. And also, we have a further distortion, and I'll give an example from the US here. In the US, in a lot of those Ivy League schools that we talk about, they have first impression coaching. So entrepreneurs are basically very diligently coached on how to present themselves, that they look more than they are, or at least they correspond to what they are, which means that you have a lot of also distortion of the way that people understand presentation versus reality. So what looks good on paper, what looks good on first introduction and first impression versus who is actually market savvy, who is actually on the ground savvy, who is actually able to drive the project to success. So these kind of things which we are kind of used to resolving through looking into your education record, they don't necessarily apply in the same way in developing markets. Also, you have to understand that you have the whole idea of even if you're able to understand the structure within, like which universities are good within a context, in a developing market, there's still the problem that education is very expensive, especially in terms of standard rates within developed markets, which means that you end up having this challenge of sifting against poor people, which is not what you want to do. Finally, we have a lot of the colonial mentality, and this is where I expect to get a lot of outrage comments, so I'm looking forward to that. So many of the Northern Hemisphere companies coming to do business with the developing world have a bit of that mentality of superiority, which is something we need to address, we need to talk about. I know that racism is a very hot topic in general, but we need to talk about it, which means that when we're talking about, for example, overtaxing differences. And I'll give you an example of corruption. So corruption is something which is really a human phenomena. You're going to see corruption everywhere. You're going to see corruption in very rich countries, in very poor countries. It's just something that is universal. It might be to different levels, it might be to different extents, but it's really universal. And yet, when you're talking about investment to developing countries, we kind of see corruption as something which is a huge deal, while it's not such a huge deal in developed markets. And to some extent it might be, I'm not completely discouraging that, but I'm just saying that you can be sitting in the US and hearing about a scandal which is ongoing, about some money being stolen or diverted, which is basically the entire GDP of the country you're looking to invest in, and yet you hear about a few corruption scandals in that country and you're going to overtax it significantly. So you're not going to give a benefit of a doubt there, or you're not going to take into account that this is a problem that you have everywhere and you have mechanisms to deal with it. Maybe the mechanisms are different in that country, but it's still not something which you have to, inappropriately overtax for. So that's just one example. To finish up on racism, I know this is going to be something that is going to be challenging will be challenged in the discussion, but the reason why racism is important when we're talking about doing business in developing markets is because only 20% of startup cash comes from Africa. For Africa, yeah. So which means that the 80% remaining comes from outside of Africa. So then racism becomes an important factor in if you're going to get funded or not. From there, if you look at another statistics, you see that in Kenya, 6% of startups receiving plus $1 million, so more than $1 million US, were led by locals. So you have 96% of startups that receive that ticket, which are led by internationals, and only 6% which are led by locals. So whatever the reason behind that, whether it's institutional racism, whether it's overt racism, whether it's something that people don't understand, whether it's within the processes, etc., doesn't matter. The outcome is there, which means that it's something that as an entrepreneur, you have to deal with, and as an investor, you have to be conscious of. Now, I spoke to a lot of challenges, and I'm almost at the end of my talk. Perfect. I want to finish with talking about a few of the solutions to those challenges. And I have just
would you mind if we go on to Ibiene and Justo, and then you can integrate solutions into part of their conversation as well?
It's only these 4 things that you see there. So if you leave me 30 seconds and I'll finish that, yeah? Because it's only these 4 things, yeah? So again, I'm going to be very clear. Every problem has its unique solution. So I'm not going to be like, if you have a specific problem, you expected to get a solution today, you're not going to get it. What I'm going to try to quickly do is just tell you some of the directions and ways of thinking that will help guide solutions within those markets. First of all, flexibility in the decision-making process. I don't think I need to explain that. I spoke to it quite a bit earlier. So just having a bit more conscious understanding of where your processes are creating bias. Then we are having the no-size-fits-all approach. And again, I'm sure that the next 2 discussions are going to talk about it a lot. And finally, making information the most of available information. So don't be rigid in your expectations of what information you're going to get. Try to make the most of it, find creative ways to use it. And the last that I've listed speaks to the first, which is evaluate processes through the lens of discrimination. So you make sure that you're not committing it. So this is basically what I wanted to do as a quick introduction, and now back to Zaina.
Thank you so much, Veselina, for those incredible stats and data, which I know has put into perspective really now the conversation that's coming up between Justo and Ibiene in African community style. It's going to be as if they are sitting at a table together, having a conversation and really sharing the intricacies of culture and values, and why it's even important to talk about values when we're looking at business and business in Africa. So Ibiene and Justo, we hand this over to you.
Thank you. Ibiene.
All right. Hi, Justo.
What do you think about this map? You know, when I come all the way from Argentina, a country which doesn't have much history with Africa. And the questions that every time I go there, they are, pretty much out of the little knowledge about the continent. Yeah. And for me, with what Veselina presented and very, to the point on the challenges and, tell me about, being a Nigerian with all these emails and scams that, you get, and be careful with Nigerians. What is to be an entrepreneur from Nigeria? When you see this map and the opportunities, tell me what, a Nigerian can share with us from the perspective of an entrepreneur.
All right, thank you, Justo, and thank you, Veselina, for broaching the subject, wherein you gave a clear perspective of what Africa is as being a continent and not a country. If you look at this map, people will be wondering, why do we have USA? Why do we have China and India in the map of Africa? Well, in a sense of landmass and population, Africa actually is. So if you compress the whole map of North America, you can see on the map, it covers a little bit of Central Africa, a little bit back into West Africa, and just slightly below the Tanzania border. If you look downwards, you will see that the whole map of China actually fits in the bottom part, the yam leg of Africa. India fits perfectly also inside Africa. If you look at Madagascar, you will see that that is the size of Great Britain. So when people say, oh, I've been to Africa, yes, you've been to the continent, but where in Africa have you been to? When you say, oh, I'm doing business in Africa, where in Africa are you doing business? Are you doing business across Africa, or are you doing business in a country or in a county in a country in Africa? So this map basically is to give you a perspective of the population of Africa, of the landmass of Africa, of the beauty and the size of Africa.
Yeah, and the diversity,
Yes.
I remember back in the days when before my father came and was posted as an ambassador, he won, playing golf, a trip to South Africa. And somebody told him, well, you're in the neighborhood, come and visit me in Kenya. That's how, our story and our history with Africa started. Since you're in the neighborhood in South Africa, come to Kenya. And it's, 4 hours, by plane. And from Argentina, it takes a couple of, more than 4 hours, but yeah, Africa is deep. As a Nigerian friend of mine told me when I was in Liberia doing some documentaries, it's big and it's deep. It's difficult to understand it, and it's necessary to go around to be able to talk about Africa, and not Africa as a country, but Africa with their 54 countries that you will talk about it.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And I think that brought you to your next question, right? Which was, what is the correlation between values and business models? And why is that something you want to talk about today?
Yeah.
Okay.
Ibiene?
Okay, yeah. So with the knowledge of what Africa is, and then you might ask the question, like you rightly said, what is the correlation between doing business and the values of the place you want to do business in? Well, to my mind, the values ingrained in the community where you want to do business is very important. Even from a Western perspective, in business school, you're taught cultural behaviors, and you're taught that for a reason. You're taught that so that you will understand the culture of the different sects. But in business school, you're taught the culture of the American, you're taught the culture of the Chinese, you're taught the culture of the Japanese, you're taught the culture of the English. Unfortunately, they did not teach you about the culture of the African people. So by this conversation between Justo and I, which is basically a banter of two friends, we want to dive in and see what are those African values that we bring to the table that are important, that every investor coming into Africa to invest, be you coming from Kenya to Nigeria, or from London to Nigeria, or from London to South Africa, there's certain things that you should know about us generally as an African people.
Yeah, for all those places that I have the chance to travel, going to refugee camps in Guinea, and just talking to the president of Kenya and meeting the late South Sudanese former president, they all have something in common: that community, that respect for community, and that respect for ancestral wisdom. Yeah, and trust. That's a little bit of the story that we have in Ibiene between yourself, South women, and myself, how everything started from the African trust. In that plane that I took from Kenya to Argentina, and with Ethiopian Airlines that they started to fly since March last year, they stopped in San Pablo, so for an hour. So people from Ethiopia getting into San Pablo, it stops for an hour. And then I was walking on the plane, and I went inside first class, business class. So I had family on my left from Indian origin. It seems they were coming from India. And then on the right, it was an African person, at least by his color. So I went and introduced myself, and in the end we had so many friends in common because there was a chat. We had some 2 business summits in Argentina and Kenya, and I wanted, Papa to come to Argentina. And we started talking, and we became friends immediately because we were able, or he was able to see how I was embracing the African culture, the African values, the respect for the wisdom, and of course the trust that it brought us here, and it took us here, Ibiene.
Perfect.
Yeah. Yes, I mean, it took a story from Baba, he called, for me to get to meet Zaina. It took trust from Baba to Zaina for Zaina to get to meet me. And here we are today. We started a brand new organization with core values that not only help the African context, but help the world in shaping the world, in understanding what is the Southern Hemisphere here to offer the world. So I might dive into to give you a few more examples. So for example, I live by a creed that says Ubuntu. I am because you are. And this means so much to me. It actually, for me, is the cradle of all civilization. Why do I say that? I exist because those who came before me existed. A lot of people, when they come to Africa, they think that, and I'm going to say Africa loosely, but I will pay particular reference to Nigeria, where I'm based. When people want to come into Nigeria, some people believe that, I've gone to all the Ivy League schools, therefore I'm experienced enough to know what is and what isn't. And come into Nigeria, first of all, without doing any research. Secondly, without understanding that we are a community. We are communal by our pedigree. And thus, do not take into consideration the community, the communeness of Africa. If, for example, you come into Nigeria and you wanted to do agricultural business, for example, and you thought that, well, Nigeria is Nigeria, without understanding that there's the north, the east, the west, the middle belt, and the south, with different climates, with different soil textures, and as such, would adapt to different kinds of crops. It will be foolhardy for you to tell me that you wanted to plant, for example, groundnuts on a large scale in Opobo, for example. Opobo is where I come from, and it's an island surrounded by the Atlantic Ocean. However, if you come in and you have the communalness at the back of your mind, you would have interactions which will lead you into further research. Should the project that you want to bring be formidable, the next step would be to engage with the community to find out what can this project do? What will it distort? If I take this into the Western way of doing business, they would ask you to do an EIA. An EIA actually is community-based in that it finds out what is the distortion that this project will bring? What will it harness? What is the win-win situation that will amount from this coming together, from this unity to do business? Mostly, I would like to close by saying that Africa does not need your sympathy or overseas development assistance. Africa just needs a fair chance to trade with the rest of the world and amongst ourselves. Justo, I mean, do you have any similarities or any examples that you'd like to share?
Yeah, totally. From Merging Mundos, once again, I had the chance to start my career in Africa, let's say, my African experience from the grassroots level. This photograph I took, as I said, I did photojournalism and international relations, always balancing out, both careers and what Africa had to offer to me. This photograph, I was doing my thesis in Guinea and Liberia, and that photograph really showed me how they go together, and the African proverb that it's with Merging Mundos in every single step and every single decision we take. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. These are the values of our community, and every time I sit down with prospect investors or companies that they want to come to to Africa. We regionalized Africa in 3 because of the markets: South Africa, Kenya, and Nigeria, Ghana. And from there, we have our hubs and our partners to be able to cover these very different, markets. Yeah, and for us, community and understanding what they need, we might take longer to reach to our goal, that I will give an example, shortly, but all of us go together. We're an inclusive business company. We believe in inclusive business and economic gain and social transformation. Merging Mundos, we have 4 pillars. One that is about commerce, one that is about tourism, a foundation which is to reinsert the reinsertion of prisoners into society through rugby, and the 4th, with the whole what's happening with COVID and the difficulties of movements, everything related to digital transformation in Africa. And for that, we have the pillar of togetherness, of partnership. When I see Africa, the first thing I think is about hardworking, entrepreneurials, eager to learn. Here with us in this conversation, we have Immaculate and Mary, two ladies which I admire very, very much for the hard work they are doing in their constituencies and for the people. Being a woman in Africa is not the easiest, and being in politics is not the easiest, but they have demonstrated that they are there for the people, for the community. Yeah, now with the whole COVID problems, we started with a Kenyan. Here in Kenya, you have 42 tribes. And as I called, Mercy, we started to, well, she started to do different masks, and we're exporting to Europe the African masks. They are with African love, and they're very entrepreneurial. They always want the best for the community. They wake up and they think about the community. They have a purpose. Ibiene.
Yeah. At the end of the day, well, from the African sun, it gives us this the should I say the nurturing ability as women, to put in the hard work, plan, and think about the future. Africans, we are very astute people, and we're very welcoming. However, it does not mean that you take us for granted. We're not looking for pity. We're not looking for assistance, as it were, hat in hand. We're looking for partners who would come and develop the place with us. It's win-win for us all the time.
Yeah, totally. Here, it's some of the, in the presentation, the 15 companies that we are opening, that they have presence through Merging Mundos. It's basically in agribusiness, retail, technology. And we believe that it's because of talking to the local population on what they would like to see themselves in the future. And we're here an agent of transformation. We have projects, and now this is a new outcome of the project, that we were bringing some biofertilizers that, today it's a biotechnology which we are bringing from Argentina, and we took 5 years to register, doing the things right from the beginning. And today our small-scale farmer, and that's the way we work with Merging Mundos. We understand the needs at the grassroots level, and we need to go together with them to see, if these technologies help in having more yields, and if it's adequate for the soils. And this person, he used the biofertilizer, you know, on maize, and he had, you know, 2 extra bags, which is 280 kilograms extra. And for that person who made the investment of $10 with transport and everything, to have a return of almost triple, depending on the price of maize, it's something that as Merging Mundos, we try to make the companies understand that we're going to talk about that a little bit, and the challenges that things might take a little bit longer, but we need to pull everyone with us. We need everyone to be the benefits of any technology that will bring to Africa, not just for profit. Yeah, and that, yes, Ibiene.
Just to add, yes, and you know, in saying that we're open and all that we demand of people is that you come with respect for us as a people. Come with respect. We are a people that deserve respect. Come with integrity, come with an honest and open mind, and come with trust. And we will embrace you with the same vibe. Just to add to what you were saying.
Yeah, totally. Thank you.
Perfect. And I think that that's a really great moment to be able to turn it to the next point of the conversation, which is where you now, after having given us an in-depth understanding from your experience of what culture is and why values are important for business models in Africa and the success that they can generate, you can now start to give us some tips on what works here and what doesn't. What are some of your lessons learned based on your experience? And as we move to that, I just want to engage with some people who had brought up some conversations in the chat, while acknowledging that we are already 10 minutes over. So from Mary Macharia, I appreciate to Veselina your mention about colonialism and racism mentality, because as a Kenyan abroad, I'm outraged by the micro lens with which Africa and other frontier nations are judged. Yet there are more scandalous issues that I see here in Canada in my case. Journalists would be a perfect ally to ease this discrepancy. Thank you. From Kildeen, I think a big stumbling block to doing business in Africa is the issue around connectivity. The market is diverse, and generally one would be able to exploit this diversity, but the distribution and communication costs are too high compared to any other place in the planet. I would like to hear from the group on what actions realistically can be taken to change this. So perhaps that's something that we can answer in our next segment. And Dr. Ibiene made a good point about how business schools teach various cultures, but do not mention African or Southeast Asian cultures. So Africans have had to learn and adjust to other cultures in order to excel in business, which in some cases goes against who they are. Perhaps investing in the continent requires creating organizations whose foundation is in line with African views, such as Ubuntu, Harambe, etc. So please keep those comments in mind as we move into your tips on market advice.
Is anyone allowed to say something?
Sure, please.
Okay, I've been listening to...
Tell us who you are first, please.
Okay, I'm Michael, I'm from Nigeria, and I'm a marketing manager for Entech Devices. I'm actually having my second degree in the University of Georgia in Tbilisi. So I'm presently in Tbilisi right now. So I have a question for Justo. Like you talked about technology down in Africa. I see a lot of opportunities of that happening in Africa, and there are like big opportunities for technology coming to Africa. But just like what Dr. Ibiene said, like when you come into Africa, we want to embrace you. We want you, we like integrity, and you know, just give you a lot of safety that you are welcome. But I look at it when I travel to Ethiopia. I tried finding out how the company can actually establish our own business over there, but there were no opportunities like this out there in Ethiopia. And looking at the frontier markets, I really want to know what are the benefits, like advantage and disadvantage of it, to when it has to do with you talking about implementing a lot of things for Africa from Argentina. I want to get that as well.
Thank you for your question. And if I say that Africa needs our technology, it's not exactly what I wanted to communicate. Argentina, we are 45 million people, and we produce food for 400 million people. And our culture is very, very similar between Latin America and Africa. They say that back, a couple of centuries ago, both continents were together. And I see the similarities, and I try to focus on that. Here in Africa, in the technology, let's say, of agriculture, planting, Argentina, average in 1 hectare of maize, we have around, average in the country, 8 tons per hectare. While in Kenya or Tanzania or Ethiopia, it's not more than 2.5. Yeah, as we speak, I came with a consortium of companies in 2011, trying to show the different technologies that we had. And because of the 3 Ps that I will mention, after, because of the presence that Merging Mundos had, finally we had the first, a consignment about to come for, machinery from Argentina, because it's a process. That process that we have to live as entrepreneurs from outsiders. Yeah, and I respect that process, and I believe that our technologies, such as it's called zero tillage, that we don't till the land, it could be an asset, for instance, for the African, the African, reality. Yeah, so it's a know-how transfer, and we have done that, and we're doing that together with Mary and Immaculate in their different counties, but at their own time.
Okay. So
with
that
capacity buildings.
You're looking at agriculture. That's what you're talking about.
They are in agriculture. We're also bringing different technologies like mobile payments from Ecuador or now this, but every single time including your voice and the voice of everyone that we are here for.
Yeah, very right. Can I say something as well? Because, if you come in with agriculture and you're actually going to include when it has to do with mobile technology and stuff like that, you see, Africa is a very big continent. Like, there are a lot of people out there that doesn't even have access to technology as well. And these people also need to see this too. They need to start, aside from the fact that you come in with agriculture, we need to come in to the aspect of technology, because it's just like what is happening now about the COVID-19, and you have access to information, I have access to information, but there are other people that doesn't even have access to these informations, and they're lacking, so they don't know anything. So even if they were being given things to take care of their welfare, they don't even know. So if you come in with agriculture, I think technology should come with it, and there should be, I don't know how I'm going to put it, like, there should be someone to put people through on how to use this technology as well, because it's really going to help. It's really going to help in every part of Africa. So.
Totally. I agree 100%. And that's, once again, in order to be here, I was able, I put myself in the real Africa. We can define the difference, but I've been traveling around from Zambia to Ethiopia, to Liberia, to Guinea, to Tanzania, meeting, from presidents and going to the maximum, security prison to understand and not to impose. And from there, follow the regulations that, each country has. For the biofertilizer, we took 5 years to register the product. Wow. Are my investors happy because thinking about profit? No. But when I tell them today that we made a difference in the life of, as they call them here, the small scale farmer, that they was, that lady was able to have 2 extra bags. It's money.
It's money.
But we see it as technology transfer. as a way of working together with the different, people involved, from the government to the farmer who needs to sustain himself or herself, most probably herself.
Thank you very much for the enlightenment. Thank you.
Perfect. And thank you for bringing up the conversation. And just before we move into the next part, I'd really like to give the voice to Jamaica, to Patricia Phillips, who has been making some comments on the chat, and whose most recent comment is about mentorship for business owners, successful business owners, especially women. Patricia, would you like to share your perspective before we move into the final part and closing?
Thank you so much, and thanks to all for this very fascinating conversation. So the business model that I believe would be great must involve mentorship, the support that especially women will need. And a previous speaker mentioned, I think, Justo, the challenges that women face globally, and especially within Mother Africa. So that's just my point. Mentorship meaning having persons who are already making it work, being able to allow others to walk alongside them so that they can see and experience and not have to necessarily experience the bad things to learn the lessons. And that mentorship also involves coaching, which is about the techniques, the technicalities. As the brother mentioned, so many do not even have access to certain basic things. But mentorship being able to see others like oneself succeeding and knowing that I can do it too. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Patricia. And I believe that that's a conversation that as South women, we would love to engage with you on further after the wisdom conversation. And so, Justo, what I'd like to suggest is, since you started on your market advice, why don't you take us through, and then we can go back to Ibiene, who can both build upon what you were saying and also close.
Yeah, thank you, Zaina. For me, the 3 Ps have been the success in opening different companies in different industries in different parts of the world. And the presence, the P for presence, is the most important P that we can have in order to be able to tackle different businesses. As we speak, we have 3 tourists in Tanzania that they were able to come, and with all the fears that they had, if they needed, a COVID test to come to Africa, was it, safe to come? And we're always in contact with our people in the ground. We are here to show the real deal. We are here through our partners. With our partners, we're able to cover. Of course, there are, the good partners and then not so good partners, but we have it everywhere. It's not an African issue. We're having, good partners, good friends everywhere in the world. But here, because of the differences that we have and how big the African continent is, we need to have that partner, that local partner, and we need to trust in what he says. They're the experts in the matter. As we speak, I just got an email on one of the companies that we're opening with some herbicides, insecticides, and we are not able to give them the response as they want. But I'm telling them, just go Yakidogo, as I say, wait, there's no rush. Things are working, not because there's not an email behind, things are not moving. We, time, patience, it's different how we do things in Africa, and I include myself in, because sometimes I'm behind things, but it doesn't mean we're not thinking about it. There are problems to solve, and those challenges are opportunities for us. Yeah. So the 3 Ps, which have help us in opening up markets in places like South Africa, Zambia, Ethiopia, doing things in Nigeria, it's presence, patience, and perseverance. And that presence now with COVID will be even more fundamental and important to have your local connection, that connection that you can trust, and that partnership that will take you, once again, not fast, but will take you further along the line. And that's, once again, 3 P's: presence, patience, and perseverance. And the most important P that, yes, I know.
I thought perhaps Ibiene could add on to that before we get to the most important P, because I'm sure she has some things to say.
All right. Thank you so much, Justo, for that very interesting, discuss. For me, what will my market advice be? It's very simple. Local knowledge is key, very important. Justo has said that. I cannot stress that enough. Come accountable. So accountability, follow the process. There is a process to everything. Don't cut corners. Don't think that I'm going to Africa is the jungle. Therefore, there should be no laws and regulations. If they say it takes 10 days, I can cut it short to 2 days. No, money is not the answer to everything. And then, thirdly, Africa is not a dumping ground. I would speak categorically. Nigeria is not a dumping ground. We are open for business. We're welcoming, but we are not a dumping ground. Come with a prospect that will enable a win-win situation. Thank you.
Okay, Justo.
For me, the most important P that I can see here with us, Analia and different people who have come through our tourism side, which is making sure that when you come to Africa, you go and meet the people. If you don't get to know the people of Africa, you are missing a big opportunity. Listen to them and just look at this beautiful photograph of all the pioneers of South women, ladies that are here to make a change. And you will see, and you have seen this since I started, almost a year ago. So thank you very much to all of you for your time, your patience, your perseverance, and that strength to be together, that togetherness that Africa has taught me.
Thank you so much. Veselina, would you like to give your practical tips to investors and perhaps add a little bit more on technology before we would love for whoever has stayed on to engage in a Q&A. We have gone over time, and we acknowledge and honor that you have stayed with us throughout. Please go ahead, Veselina.
Yeah. So I'll just quickly cover in the same idea of what are the big takeaways. I spoke to some of those already during the initial talk I had. But basically, I'll kind of speak a bit in a metaphor here, but sit at the table and eat. Yeah. So you sit at a table that has, I mean it in several different implications. First of all, when you're talking to your partners in developing market, especially let's say we're talking about Kenya specifically or Africa specifically, then you have to treat them as equals. So sitting on the table, that's kind of, that metaphor comes from, first you have to make sure you're treating people as equals. Second, it also means that you have to be there, you have to be present. Just with any venture, you cannot just try to manage things from with a very helicopter view of things without really understanding what's happening in the underlying situation. And three, the idea of eating is that sometimes when you see what other cultures eat, you can get a bit yucked out, because your culture doesn't eat it, even if they're comparable things that in your culture are eaten. So the idea here is there will be differences, so it's just a question of accepting those, integrating them, instead of trying to evaluate them based on your own understanding and perception. Then the second thing, very practical, I would say, is that setbacks work differently in developing countries. And that comes from a lot of these discussions and this information that I mentioned, a lot of these differences. If you don't have very set systems, then the setbacks you're going to experience will have to be handled differently. You may not have the same legislative processes to ensure what you're trying to do. You might not have the same bureaucratic processes. So you have to learn the way of the people and kind of people you're trying to work with, and adapt to it to the extent of your moral levels. Yeah. Then finally, it's again speaking to the same, understand the mentality and adjust your expectations. Justo spoke to it quite in detail. If in a certain culture it just takes time to make decisions, if you're pushing people to make decisions on the spot because that's what your culture is about, then you're going to end up just alienating people from yourself, and you're not going to end up having strong and long-term business relationships. So it's really a question of understanding what the culture is and just working within those constraints. So I think when we're talking about the technological side, that's Zana, you wanted to speak, that's in the Q&A. So I'll let you introduce that, and then I'll get into it.
Excellent. So our intention and our hope is that this was merely the appetizer at the dinner table, where we all get to sit together and converse more, learn more, understand more. And the commitment from South-South Women is that we will be having more conversations, meaningful conversations on what it means to understand the culture of the countries and the sectors in Africa and in Latin America, in the Caribbean, at those continents for now, that you would like to be engaging in business with. So stay tuned for that. And as we go into, probably, well, I have a question for you. My question for you is, especially if you're not from Africa, how has your perception of Africa changed based on this conversation? And has it changed? And please feel free to unmute yourself, say who you are, and share your answer. And while you're doing that, I would love to acknowledge everybody who has joined us from Nigeria and Jamaica and Kenya. I see 2 participants have raised their hands. Kuria Joseph, did you have something to say about that? And I actually can't see the other person who's raised your hand. So please, this is a respectful forum. Go ahead and unmute and say what you need to say.
Patricia, who is raising her hand. I think Kuria's had his hand up for a while. It might be a mistake. So I think Patricia, if you'd like to share.
Yes, just to say that what is reinforced for me is the diversity, which is so similar to the Caribbean, where people tend to see us as homogenous. And so that's reinforced. There's no new information at this point. There's so much rather that is new, because I'm very undereducated about the continent from which I originated as a Caribbean person. Thank you.
Well, Patricia, it means so much to us that we have been able to partake in a conversation with you that allows you to connect to the continent. And we look forward to much more. And thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
It's me. Okay, me. You asked me 3 questions during my presentation, so I've noted them down. I'm happy to respond to them. I will wait for other people.
Please,
so just respond to the first one, then we can give the floor back, respond, etc. Yeah, that's fine. So the first question that I was asked is very interesting. It was about aid and how does aid distort developing markets. I think this is crucial. I know I really glossed over it, and yet I managed to go almost twice over time. So there you go. That's the reason. The way that aid distorts markets, I'll give you an example from Kenya so that you can really illustrate it for yourself, is that usually markets are driven by market forces. So you have supply and demand. Then aid comes in and it basically provides a lot of supply in a certain place. That's usually what aid does. And this can be done in a very carefully, meticulously done and really well structured way, so that it has really good results in the long term. But it also can be done in a very short perspective kind of way, which is unfortunately frequently how aid happens generally. That's why many countries globally are actually refusing aid, so you have that situation as well. So what that means, I'll give you an example from Kenya. For example, maybe some 10 years ago, Kenya had a huge donation of textbooks that came for like very entry level, some to sum and subtract and stuff like that, very entry-level educational system textbooks that were brought to the country by somebody very benevolent who just woke up and said, oh, I really want to improve education. It's such a big problem in Africa, we need to improve it. So they came in, they brought a lot of books that were then distributed within the community, which is great, amazing intentions. But as the saying says, the road to hell is paved by good intentions. So what happened is, before that, there was a very vibrant book production economy going on in that sector, and everybody was producing those books. They were making money locally. Everything was even if there was a shortage, a lot of the economy was driven by that. Now this aid came, they killed entirely that industry because for a year they don't get an income, which of course not many enterprises can survive that, considering and not even in the Western world, but talk about the very small buffers that poor economies have. So that happened, and then the next year that benevolent person was like, okay, I'm done. So they left, and they didn't bring the books again, which means that the next year there were no books for anybody. So the aid really makes things worse in the long term. And that's basically when we talk about aid, this is like one of the most intense scenarios where you really destroy the local economy for the long term, and it's very difficult for it to start picking up again and exacerbate the problem with your aid. That's why aid is something that needs to be treated as a commercial investment most of the time, so that you can have a more of an impact perspective of what is your investment going to do to people and to the outcome, that if the return this here is the well-being of the people. So how is that going to change in the future? So that's kind of just to show about aid in the stock markets.
Perfect. And thank you for that awesome example and response, Veselina. And I don't want to put her on the spot, but if she is willing, we have an Argentine agricultural engineer from who's here and who's been doing work in Africa, and we would love to hear your perspective as a woman in one of the most vibrant sectors in Africa. Giselle, are you here, and are you willing to share?
You have to unmute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Hi, Zaina. Hi, Justo. Hi, everybody. Nice to be here with you guys. Yes, as you said, I'm agronomy engineer. I'm working in Angola and Zambia since 6 years. So I bring a consultancy and make a technology transference from Argentina to these countries. So it's very exciting for me being here today and showing my experience.
Okay, and are there any particular, so we talked today about values and challenges. Do you have anything that you can share from your experience about, as a Latin American woman in Angola and in Zambia? Again, two very different countries, to Kenya and Nigeria and Ethiopia and other countries in Africa.
Of course. In fact, as everybody know, world is changing and emerging markets are growing so fast, and countries like China, India, South Africa, Nigeria are creating a very strong influence around the world and a new threat into business, as we all know. So this is a new opportunity for us inside of Africa. So this year especially, we create a new business model concept that is driving success with a global mindset, new opportunities, new challenges, how prepared you are to receive these opportunities into agriculture and agro-industries, but not forcing the ideology that I bring from my country. It's not that. We are trying to embrace the people. So especially first of all, we help people to change the mindset, how to succeed. Also, we give tools into a culture factor that can give you an advantage to change your company reality in Africa. And in the second stage, we give services into a commercial custom engineering, commercial agronomic engineer, and government management engineer. So the first thing is the culture, embrace, understand the place that we are, and then transmit the knowledge. That's our value in the company.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you very much. I would like to bring today to a close. Would probably like to do so by honoring the two ministers that we have in our presence, from either Mary Nzomo or Dr. Immaculate Maina. If you would like to share something before we close.
Hi, Zaina.
Hi.
Hi, Justo, and everybody else. Good afternoon. In Kenya, it's evening now. I'm happy to be in this forum and to listen to all of you. The insights have been very, very good in terms of support to business environment in Africa, in the county of Nakuru in Kenya. And working at the grassroots, a lot of farmers, you get to see a lot of what has been talked about in reality with the partners that we continue to work with, both local partners and international partners. In addition to everything else that had been said about the market advice, the presence, the patience, the perseverance, people, culture, and so on, I just want to add one more last thing, that it's very important for business to understand the current policy environment. What are the government priorities at that particular point when you're introducing your business? And that then you're able to align very well to the current conversations. Because when you align to government policy, it becomes very easy to get a reception. The bureaucracies will be less. The mechanism to support your ideas will be faster from the official channels, and that really helps. So just want to add one more P, policy environment. Thank you so much for the insights. I think it's a great conversation, and I look forward to hearing more from all of you and many more. Thank you, Zaina. Thank you, Justo, for making this happen.
Okay.
P, policy environment. Perfect. Welcome, Mary.
Yeah. Mary Nzoma from Trans Nzoia County. This is a bread basket of the country. We feed the whole of Kenya with maize. Ugali, it's called Ugali here. And courtesy of Zaina and Justo, I was able to visit Argentina with my governor and a team from the county in 2016, I believe. And this transformed our thinking about the way we approach. Okay, I'm from the agriculture sector, so I'll talk more about the agriculture sector. And of course, the technology we borrowed from Argentina and the way people do things, it really changed the mindset of my governor and the team that we had, and including myself. And I know that we were able even to borrow some technology. There is a technology that we borrowed from there. And like it has been rightfully said, this issue of aiding people, giving people aid. Initially, we decided we would give the farmers that technology for free so that we can introduce it to them. And slowly we thought we would win them out. But sometimes the problem with our people is that once they get a free thing, they expect to get it through and through. But a few serious farmers are able to pick up that technology, and they are already using it. Conservation agriculture is a great thing that we picked from Argentina, and a number of our farmers are doing it. We still don't have enough equipment or machinery to do conservation agriculture, and more so for the small-scale farmers. And that's why this is one area, even as a department, we are really looking for people who can invest in small equipment that can fit the people who have small acreages, like the working tractors and things like that. And we're also trying to interest youth to do business. And you see, we need to entice them with technology that excites them. And this is what we are working towards, and I believe there is a lot we can do in this area. And just this morning, actually, I had another conversation, a webinar on bilateral cooperation between Kenya and another country. And in fact, what was emerging is that there is still a huge gap in capacity, because you may think about technology innovations, but there is a huge information gap that we need to bridge so that we can enable our people to pick up the innovations, the technologies much more easily. And this one came up as an interesting area because Kenya is, I would say, we have the capacity to feed ourselves, but we still have huge gaps. We still import. We import food, and yet we have the capacity to produce. We have not been able to unlock the potential that exists here because we've not been able to actually mechanize, like the way you saw mechanization happening in Argentina, use modern technology. And I'm happy that Justo is coming up with wonderful products. And we'll be working together to see how we can promote these products amongst our farmers. So I'm excited. I've been part of this conversation through and through. And I also happen to be the chair of the Agriculture Caucus and the chair of the CEC's Women Power. And I believe as women, we can actually influence a lot of things that happen in our countries. So Zaina, Justo, I'm indebted to you because courtesy of you, I was able to open up my mind by visiting Argentina. And I believe whatever we pick from there will not go to waste. We are working on it, and every time we will go a notch higher. So thank you so much, and God bless you all.
Thank you too, Mary. And I believe that your example is the reason that South-South Women exists, because when we are able to position women at the forefront of strategic thinking, of visionary future thinking, and then the implementation, it's possible that things can move. And we noticed that there was a 65% to 35% discrepancy in male to female participation in South-South interaction as we were hosting our business summits and putting together South-South women. And that's where we saw the gap. And we said that gap is going to be the problem that we solve as this organization. So we are grateful that you have honored us with your time and your energy today, going on to almost 2 hours of conversation, which was totally unanticipated. I believe that that tells us that there is something valuable in what we are discussing, and that perhaps there is a need for more of this kind of conversation to emerge. Please share your feedback with us. We are here to serve you. Progress and unity are the way forward through acceptance and inclusion and integration. So if we want to cause a paradigm shift, or plant the seed, or grow the seed for how business is done from Africa, through Africa, and for Africa, then these are the conversations to participate in. The kinds of conversations that carry the vibration of transformation, of win-win, of equality and justice, things that are values and virtues that the world is screaming for currently. And I believe that every single person who attends this kind of conversation, men and women, believe that this is the way forward. So keep joining us. Let's grow together. Let's impact together. Let's create together. And we truly look forward to seeing you at our upcoming wisdom conversations. And thank each one of you once again for all the time you've taken from every part of the world from which you've joined us, not only to contribute, but also to stay and to say to us through your presence that this is just the beginning.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. My support system, you know who you are. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone who honored Ibiene and Justo and Veselina's invitations. Diego, Angel, Valeria, Patricia, thank you. Sekina, Mausi,
Thank you very much.
Mercy, thank you.
All of you.
Thanks for my family, and I saw some friends from Bulgaria. Thank you as well for coming in.
Thank you so much. Helen.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Nitsa, thank you. Thank you. Veselina, Susan, Rosemary, Violet, Tony, Mabel, hola Mabel, Richie,
thank you.
Keldine, Kepta, thank you for being here.
Hello, how are you?
Great to hear you.
Very nice. Let me stay here. I heard yours, and very interesting for us. Acá estamos. Besito a todos. Genial.
Un abrazo. Muchísimas gracias. Neoma, please tell me if I've said that correctly.
Yes, you did.
Okay, and where are you joining us from? From Nigeria?
No, the Gambia.
Oh,
I've been to Gambia.
Oh, what a pleasure to have you. Please, we have to hear you. I know we're closing, but please share something.
I loved Gambia. It was best part of the world, really.
Well, I must say it was Ibiene's invitation, part of her alumni from her former secondary school, so she put it up. So I came on board, but unfortunately I missed her presentation because I was doing something else, and 1 o'clock the Nigerian time is actually 12 o'clock my time here. So I came on board. I missed her presentation. Raining heavily here, my internet was not stable, but I just tried to stay true to the end. But I heard what the Brazilian guy, when he was making his contributions and asking Ibiene, and he talked, she was answering. I think that's one of the things I learned from this now. She said something about coming into a place and doing your homework very well. It doesn't matter how educated you think you are. It doesn't matter your background, your educational qualification. You cannot succeed when you have not, done your homework very well about a place. And Africa, as she rightly pointed out, is a continent, not a country. So even amongst the countries, things are done differently. Here in the Gambia, things are done differently from what it is like back home. So you also need to understand the people, understand their culture, if you must float a business here and, it succeeds. So I hope some other time I'll be able to be part of this and learn more from you people. Thank you.
Oh, and you're so passionate. We must have you back.
Fantastic.
Right.
Walk Africa, walk every corner.
Thank you, Noma.
You're welcome.
Sandra, muchas gracias. Thank you so much.
A ti, gracias, de Argentina. Gracias a ustedes.
Thank you, Sandra. Gracias.
Gracias por estar.
Gran placer.
Sandra and Marwa for being our incredible team, as always. Marwa will be facilitating the next conversation on the gift of challenge. Diego, un gusto. Muchísimas gracias por estar. Mercy, thank you for being here. Josephine, thank you everyone so much. We're going to close this now. We will be sending you an email with the recording, as well as an invitation to our subsequent or our upcoming wisdom conversations. Every week it's something different, because we believe as women in the Global South, we have to address everything from spirituality to business, but we always do it from the perspective of consciousness. That is our mandate, to spread the wisdom of consciousness. We believe that everybody's wisdom is valuable and worthy of being shared. And we believe that every woman, at least once in her lifetime, has to be able to fully declare, with the support of a man, I am the woman I have always wanted to be. So until that happens, we have a mission together.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll close this now. And thank you so much. Thank you all.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Welcome. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you for your time.
Bye.
Thank you to the hosts. Thank you.